Imagine being cast adrift in a small open boat on the frozen expanse of a vast bay, with no food, no shelter, and no hope of rescue. This was the fate of Henry Hudson, one of history's most celebrated explorers, after his own crew turned against him. In June 1611, Hudson, his teenage son John, and 7 loyal sailors were forced into a tiny shallop and abandoned in what is now Hudson Bay. The mutineers sailed away on the ship Discovery, leaving the castaways to die. No one knows exactly what happened next, whether they starved, froze, or were killed by indigenous people, but their bodies were never found. The mutiny marked the end of a voyage that had begun with such promise, a quest for the Northwest Passage that instead became a tale of betrayal, suffering, and mystery. Henry Hudson, the man who had mapped much of the Arctic, was erased from history by his own men. Henry Hudson was already a legend by 1610. An English explorer hired by the Dutch and then the English, he had made 3 previous voyages in search of a northern route to Asia. He discovered the Hudson River and explored the Arctic waters around Spitsbergen. But his greatest ambition remained the Northwest Passage, a sea route above Canada that would open trade with the Orient. In April 1610, backed by the British Muscovy Company, Hudson set sail from London on the Discovery, a 55-ton ship with a crew of 23 men. Among them was his son John, a loyal boy of about 14. The crew was a mix of experienced sailors and rough adventurers, including the mutinous ringleader Henry Green, a man Hudson had befriended, but who harbored resentment. Hudson's reputation for secrecy and favoritism had already caused tension. The stage was set for disaster. The Discovery sailed northwest, passing the coasts of Greenland and Labrador. By June, they entered the turbulent waters of what is now Hudson Strait. Icebergs loomed, and fog often reduced visibility to 0. Yet Hudson pushed on, navigating with skill and determination. The crew worked together, hauling ropes and manning the pumps as the ship groaned through the pack ice. For a time, morale was high. They believed they were on the verge of a breakthrough. In late July, they emerged into a vast, open sea, which Hudson named the Mare Liberum, or Free Sea. It was, in fact, Hudson Bay. Convinced he had found the Pacific, Hudson sailed south along the eastern shore, charting the coastline. The crew shared his optimism. The Northwest Passage seemed within reach. But the bay was a dead end, and the summer was slipping away. By September, Hudson realized he had not reached the Pacific. The bay was enormous, but its western shore offered no outlet. The crew grew restless as the weather turned cold and supplies dwindled. Hudson, however, refused to turn back. He ordered the ship to winter in the southern part of the bay, near the mouth of the Rupert River. The decision was dangerous. Winter in the Arctic was harsh and unpredictable. The crew built a makeshift shelter on shore, but the ship remained their main refuge. As food ran low, Hudson imposed strict rations. He also showed favoritism, hoarding private stores for himself and his favorites, including his son and a few loyal men. This bred resentment. The ship's carpenter, Philip Staff, warned Hudson that the crew was unhappy, but Hudson dismissed the concerns. The seeds of mutiny were sown. The winter of 1610 to 1611 was brutal. Temperatures plummeted, and the bay froze solid around the Discovery. The crew huddled below decks, burning what little fuel they had. Scurvy set in, causing bleeding gums and weakness. Hudson maintained discipline, but grew increasingly paranoid. He accused some men of stealing food, and conflicts erupted. Despite the hardship, spring brought hope. The ice broke up in June and the Discovery was freed. Hudson planned to continue the search westward, but the crew had other ideas. They wanted to go home. The leader of the discontent was Henry Green, a man Hudson had taken under his wing but who now plotted against him. Green and others, including the boatswain Robert Juet, began to secretly plan a mutiny. They knew that if Hudson continued, they might all die. The choice was stark: abandon Hudson or perish. On the morning of June 23, 1611, the mutineers struck. Henry Green and Robert Juet led a group of armed men onto the deck. They seized the ship's weapons and confronted Hudson. The captain was dragged from his cabin, bound, and forced into the ship's shallop, a small open boat. With him went his son John, the loyal carpenter Philip Staff, and 5 other sick or disabled sailors. The shallop had no sail, little food, and no water. Hudson begged for mercy, but Green was unmoved. The mutineers cut the tow line and sailed away, leaving the small boat bobbing in the icy water. Hudson's last words were reportedly a plea for his son, but the wind carried them away. The shallop drifted out of sight, and the Discovery turned eastward. The mutineers had committed an act of ultimate betrayal, condemning 8 men to a slow death. The mutineers sailed east, but their journey was far from easy. Guilt and fear plagued them. As they navigated the treacherous straits, supplies ran low. The Discovery began to leak, and the crew argued over who was to blame. Henry Green, the ringleader, grew paranoid, accusing others of disloyalty. One night, in a drunken rage, Green attacked a fellow mutineer and was stabbed to death. Robert Wett, the navigator, died of starvation days later. The remaining crew struggled to survive, resorting to eating seals and birds. When they finally reached Ireland, only 4 men were alive to tell the tale. They were arrested and tried for mutiny, but amazingly, they were acquitted. The court accepted their story that Hudson had died of natural causes, a lie that allowed them to escape justice. The truth of what happened to Hudson would never be fully revealed. What happened to Henry Hudson and his companions? No one knows for certain. The shallop was never found. Some historians believe they died within days from exposure or starvation. Others suggest they may have reached shore and been killed by indigenous people. Or perhaps they survived for a time on berries and game. There are even stories of a white man living among the Cree years later, but none were ever confirmed. The bay where Hudson was abandoned now bears his name, a permanent reminder of his final voyage. The mystery has haunted explorers for centuries. In 1631, an expedition found a cross on the shore, possibly erected by Hudson or his men. But no trace of the castaways was ever discovered. Henry Hudson, the man who opened the door to the New World, vanished into the wilds he had helped map. The 4 survivors of the mutiny eventually returned to England, but their lives were forever marked by the crime. They were tried for murder, but the court acquitted them, perhaps because the Muscovy Company wanted to avoid scandal. Yet the truth leaked out. Sailors whispered about the mutiny, and Hudson's fate became a cautionary tale. The Discovery itself was later used in other expeditions, but its crew was always wary. The mutiny had shattered the code of loyalty that bound sailors. As for the families of the lost, they received no justice. Hudson's wife, Catherine, petitioned the king for compensation, but was denied. She died in poverty. The story of Hudson's betrayal became a symbol of the dangers of exploration, not just from nature, but from human desperation. The Arctic had claimed another victim, but this time the killer wore a familiar face. Henry Hudson's final voyage remains one of history's most tragic expeditions. His quest for the Northwest Passage failed, but his discoveries reshaped the map. The Hudson River, Hudson Strait, and Hudson Bay all bear his name, a legacy of exploration that endures. Yet his death is a reminder of the dark side of discovery, the cost paid by those who push beyond the edge. The mutiny was not just an act of desperation, it was a human failure, a breakdown of trust and leadership. Hudson's own flaws, his secrecy, favoritism, and stubbornness contributed to his downfall. But the mutineers, too, bore the weight of their choice. They escaped the law, but not their conscience. The story of Henry Hudson is a cautionary tale about ambition, loyalty, and the thin line between heroism and tragedy. If you found this story compelling, subscribe to Doomed Expeditions for more tales of exploration and survival.